Okay, let's kick off module 4. We'll get into templates and related and settings. We do have some new features added. We have them on the NT8 side, superbands. We'll incorporate these into the Quantower superbands. And let me show you some modes of operation. Let's go into the indicator settings. Something my programmer came up with. I currently have the bands in what's called the static bands mode, and it is taking a bit long to load up charts anytime you fire up your charts in the very beginning when you connect feed, or anytime you make settings changes to the chart. So we'll work on that. He did add a whole bunch of additional calculation stuff. That's mainly what's going on. And I don't have a whole lot of charts pulled up, so I think I have 4 or 5 on this laptop here. If I had something where I had like 10 charts or more, I could see it really dragging on. Um, most of your charts, you probably don't need more than like 10 or 15 days to load. Uh, you know, so that does definitely affect things too. Okay, so I currently have not really used the bands a lot in static mode, but I'm going to shoot a module video where I'm going to show it in replay mode in both the regular mode, that would be unchecked, and we'll go to that, and then the static bands mode. And let's just go through settings real quick. I'll make a template of this. I personally like on the main bands for kind of your bigger picture look at where's the dynamic range of the market, regardless of the time frame you're on, in the 133 up to the 233 range. I've tended to have mine higher. I really kind of want to see the bigger picture outer edges of what price is doing. That's how I'm using the bands in and amongst targeting pattern-based or levels or breach of the bands, and then momentum signals out of that. Okay, so 233, I like the setting on the main deviation anywhere from a 2.7 to a 3.0 as a generic, really good starting point. Remember, the lower you go, the bigger your excursions are going to be outside of your bands. We do have an ability to do a quick optimization. You can check that box. And in this box, I could set it to like, I only want to see, and on an exercise like this, the first time you do it to get a really good optimization, you should probably go back on your days to load at least, I'd say at least 30 days. And go in here and type in something like, I only want to see 5, 6, or 7%, something like 7% of all the price action outside of the main bands. If you have about, 9, 10% of price action outside of the bands or more, your bands are set too narrow. So let me go something like a 7, and then we'll let it do the calculation. And I'm going to say optimize my main bands so that only 7% of all the price candlesticks are on the outside of the bands, and the other 93% are inside of the bands for the amount of days to load that I have. It's a very, very smart feature. And we have that on the Quantower. And yes, the calculation is taking a long time on this new variant with additional features of the superbands. We'll work on that and get it as best we can. But I have gotten a lot of positive feedback from some of my heavy hitter traders. They are liking the static bands mode for some setups that they are working. And it just gives you another way of using the bands, and probably will be the last structural change or major feature we ever add to the superbands. I kind of just need to be done with them and work on other stuff this summer, like Tilt Trader was, the drawing of the lines is a little bit fussy. We're getting it though. We're getting closer and closer. So I'm anticipating we'll have those out before the end of July. And then, we can just keep honing in on all the tools. Okay, so this is taking a long time to calculate, but it is going back, I think, 20 days. So 20 days is a lot of data. But the reason it's taking so long is we've added a lot of calculation criteria in the bands now that wasn't there before. So anyhow, there it is. And I'm on live feed, but the markets aren't operating right now. But what it'll do is eventually it pops up some verbiage on your chart, and it basically tells you what width to set the bands to hit that percentage of the amount of candlesticks outside the bands that you requested. Now, if you remember, I did go in and I did uncheck static bands. So now I'm in normal mode, and I did say optimize. So what I suggest then is when the markets are actually trading and there's live tick by tick data being fed into your charts, go into your data series, set the days to load. And I would suggest, like, the first time you do it, go back about 30 days. Give that calculation a good amount of period, whether there's, where it's covering some congested trading periods, some expansive trading periods, and kind of get in other words, don't do like 5 days, because the market might be in one behavior of narrow range action versus its typical standard, or it might be in a daily range that's lower than normal. So I would say, 30 days is a good, and you could go back farther if you want. It's just going to take a while to calculate it out. And then what you're going to see is you're going to get some verbiage that's printed on the chart that tells you what to go in. It'll show you the percentage that was outside of the bands. And then it'll tell you what to go in and set for your main deviation to achieve having only 7% of all your price candlesticks outside of the bands. 5 to 7% is the sweet spot on intraday stuff. So that's if I'm between 5 and 7, that works for me. And the nice thing is these bands are dynamic, so they auto adapt to rapid changes in volatility. That's already in the bands. Okay, I'm going to uncheck that. I realize it's not going to print out the message because there's no tick by tick data calculating that it needs to finalize that overall computation. So 133 to 233 on the width, depending on how responsive you want the bands. My typical charts that I run it day after day, I'm sitting at 233. And then I like anywhere from 2.7 on the width of the bands to as high as 3.0. Oops, 3.0. So I'm going to leave these for now on 2.9. Now, fast length, that's the fast bands. For the way I'm using them in this mode, I like 12 and 2.5. For the mode that I have the fast bands in now, I'm not really looking for main band crosses. I'm looking more for patterns. Can I see when price is hooking and changing directions on a micro basis? So the fast bands are your micro analysis of price, and your main bands are your macro analysis of price. So the main bands give you a dynamic range. So it's showing you what's the current calculated range of price in your current period in comparison to, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, actually over 1,000, some bars back. So what I'm looking for, and I mentioned this some of the prior videos, if I see a market that's in an uptrend period, I like to see the fast bands, at the mid-band area, or I should say below the mid-band area, and starting to give me momentums on pullbacks that I could utilize. See how the fast bands are hooking, that I could utilize to jump into, trend continuation type trades. Or in this case, we had a big fat W pattern and lift. So pattern in conjunction with trend continuation. So here's some, let me move this drawing tool. Here's some pullback. The fast bands are hooking back in the direction of the trend. Here, in conjunction then with a momentum signal. So really high probability areas to be scalping in alignment with a main bands shown developing or then continuing trend. And just the same when you experience periods where there's downtrends. You're getting the main bands to start both pointing obviously down. You're getting any sort of lift and rotations back down of the fast bands. Actually, the fast bands were already down right there. But, lift of the fast bands, then the fast bands kind of make a little hook pattern. I love looking for those hooks in conjunction, but I want to make sure I can get my entry above the mid band for a short or below the mid band for longs, so on. If I see M patterns in conjunction with my trades, I like it even more, or W patterns with my trades, and so on. So I've talked about that in the prior videos. So especially if I see a market that's running out of momentum to the upside, spending time outside the bands than inside, and then I'm getting lower pivot highs, and I'm getting M patterns, and I'm getting hooks on the fast bands. The main bands have rolled over. Now I'm getting some premium kickback against the developing downtrend type setups or trend continuation setups. The fast bands go up, they hook a bit, and I'm getting a mom signal. And it's all happening above the mid band in a downtrend or below the mid band in uptrends. I'm getting pullback trend continuation signals of a hook in the fast bands leading into a mom signal. So those are the mom signals that I feel it's worth attacking or that I know are of higher probability when you're doing live visual-based trading or manual trading. Okay, so we'll go back to those settings for a second. So we'll call that good. I wouldn't want to make my bands any more narrow than that for this type of mode. If I make the bands too narrow, then I'm going to miss potential crosses outside the main bands, and I do want to pay attention to those too. In other words, if I went down to like a 1, let's say I went down to a 1.2 or something, watch how narrow the fast bands get. And that's kind of then taking away from or degrading the potential of having those fast bands have excursions outside the main bands that I can then see as a visual signal with the vertical stripe lines. And again, we'll clean this up to calculate. When we add changes, there's always going to be where my haste is to get it out to you guys. You can play with it. It's not always going to be perfect right away. We'll hone it out in the day or two after. I had to go on an unannounced multi-day trip with the family that just was impromptu, and they wanted me to go. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll go, even though I got 50 things I'm working on. And then my programmer was going to be on vacation then anyhow. So I'm like, okay, I'll go since he's going to be out of the loop for a while. But we're all kind of coming back into the loop here. By the end of this weekend, we'll be back to chugging along, full-time engagement. Okay, finally. Now you'll notice something different. In the past, in the regular mode, notice how the fast bands actually don't go outside of the main bands, but I'm getting cross signals. The programmer put in this ability to kind of calculate what would have actually happened live, at least when you do a historical backfill. So live, the calculation estimate is I would have had a short there and there. I would have had one there. I would have had a long there. So he's going to keep working on that and get to a point where maybe even with the non-static bands setting, when you do a historical backfill, it can kind of show you where were the actual crossing points.